Hey guys, welcome back to more malicious compliance stories. When your boss revokes everyone's approved paid time off and dares you to quit if you're not happy, you have two choices. Bend over and take it, or call the bluff. 9 of us chose option 2. This is what happens when a boss cancels vacations. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. So I worked at a software company in a big city, nothing too fancy, just a decent product that processed payments for small businesses. I was a senior implementation analyst, which is a fancy way of saying I was the person merchants yelled at when they wanted our stuff to just work with their old systems. The company had gone through a bunch of changes. When I started, it was actually pretty chill, reasonable deadlines, flexible time off, and managers who remembered that you were human. Over time, upper management changed, we got bought out by a bigger holding company, and everything slowly turned into metrics, efficiency, and do more with less. That is how we ended up with the new department head, who I will just call boss. I reported to a team lead who reported to a manager, who then reported to boss. So boss was 2 levels above me, but made it very clear that she thought of herself as the owner of our souls. Boss came from some logistics company where, according to her, she had turned a bloated lazy team into a high-performance engine. She told us this every chance she got. She also loved phrases like grind season, push through the wall, and we're a family. You know, all the usual red flags. When boss first joined, there was this short honeymoon period where she pretended to be listening. She did one-on-ones with people and asked about pain points and bottlenecks and career goals. People tried to be honest. We had one main complaint: we were burning out. Our team handled all new big merchant onboardings and complex integrations, plus escalations from support. Every late lunch, every high-value client drama, every the CEO knows this person personally situation ended up on our plate. We are all experienced and pretty good at our jobs, but deadlines kept getting shorter and scope creep was constant. People were already working late and checking emails on weekends. We survived because our previous director had been pretty strong about vacation rules. The rule was simple: if you're on PTO, you're offline. No calls, no quick questions, no last minute, "Can you just jump on this escalated call?" You were out. That rule, to be clear, is the only reason a lot of us hadn't quit already. During those early talks with boss, everyone said the same thing. The only way we are staying sane was by using our PTO, carefully staggering it so there was always enough coverage. We asked for more headcount or at least a slowdown on sales, promising impossible onboarding timelines. Boss nodded a lot and said things like, "I hear you," and "we will definitely look at capacity planning." But then about 2 months later, the hammer dropped. The company announced a big strategic push. The holding company wanted to triple our enterprise footprint in some short time frame window. So that meant in return a flood of new big clients, all promising revenue that was already being counted in some executive spreadsheet. Sales went berserk and they sold anything that moved. We started getting integration requests that were borderline nonsense. My calendar turned into a wall of overlapping calls. Boss looked more and more excited. She loved telling us how this is the kind of crunch that makes careers. Our manager tried to be a buffer, but even he was clearly getting pressure from above. And by the way, guys, are these bosses and managers just plain stupid? Who in their right mind would think that crunch is a good thing? Look at any of the recent AAA game releases and you know that crunch is definitely not good. Anyway, at the same time, half the team had upcoming vacations. Some had booked trips months before. One coworker had a sibling getting married overseas. Another one had a house move scheduled. I had a week planned with my family. So yeah, nothing wild, just a beach rental and a promise to my partner that I would actually disconnect for once. We were all watching the calendar like a game of Tetris, making sure coverage was balanced. Every time a big new client got thrown at us, we would reshuffle, trade call coverage, move around non-urgent stuff, and we were stretched, but it was still doable. Then boss scheduled an all-hands for our department. That is never good news, obviously. We all joined the video call and boss had that fake upbeat voice going. She started with a speech about how we were on the verge of something huge, how corporate was watching this initiative very closely, and how this quarter is going to define our brand in the market. You could tell she was actually proud that she got to use all these buzzwords, but then she changed tone and said, "To make this happen, we need everyone on deck. We cannot afford any distractions." And that is when she dropped it. Effective immediately, I'm putting a freeze on all non-critical PTO for this department until after this push. The call chat just stalled. You know that stunned silence where everyone is typing to their friends but nobody dares to say anything publicly? That one. Someone finally unmuted and asked what non-critical meant. Boss said, anything that's not legally protected leave or a true emergency. We will review exceptions, but in general, no vacations, no personal trips, no time away that can wait until after this push. Another person asked about trips already booked, especially international ones, and boss said, I appreciate that some of you made plans, however, business needs have shifted. Our PTO policy always states requests are subject to business needs. You're welcome to move your plans. You could almost hear the eye twitch through people's cameras. Someone asked if we would at least get comp time or bonuses, and boss said, we are all in this together. The reward is being part of a successful launch, and high performers will absolutely be remembered during review season. Remote trash talk translated, you might get a Starbucks gift card 3 months from now, if we remember. But then boss said the line that pretty much sealed her fate. People were pushing back politely. My manager tried. Morale's already fragile. People have been counting on this time off for months. Boss's voice went hard. Look, this is not up for debate. If you want to be part of a high-performing team, sometimes you gotta make sacrifices. If anyone feels like that's unreasonable, she paused for effect, you might want to consider if this is the right place for you. And then she said, very clearly, if you don't like it, quit. Everyone just kind of froze because there it was, the mask dropped. She added, to be clear, this is a directive. No PTO that impacts project timelines will be approved until after the push. If I see people trying to sneak around this, I will remember it. Then she ended the call like she hadn't just set a bomb in the middle of the department. I'm not gonna go into deep legal stuff, but basically where we are, vacation is not just a nice to have. There's a minimum amount employers are required to let you actually take. They can manage the scheduling within reason, but they cannot just blanket ban it for long stretches, especially when people already have it approved, unless there's some genuine emergency like a natural disaster or something operationally critical melting down. A self-inflicted sales crunch does not qualify. Second, our HR policies. The internal handbook, which they made us sign every year, said that vacation could be rescheduled with reasonable notice and for time-limited business needs in good faith cooperation with the employee. It also said that approved PTO should not be revoked except in extraordinary circumstances, and that doing so required director-level approval plus HR sign-off. Boss was technically at that level, but HR approval was its own thing. And third, the job market. Implementation analysts with a few years' experience who can talk to non-technical people without sounding like robots are actually in pretty solid demand. A lot of us had recruiters pinging us on LinkedIn already. We had stayed up because, up until recently, the place had been decent, but loyalty only goes so far. Fourth, and this was the big one, our clients. Our team handled maybe 80% of the company's revenue critical onboarding. You couldn't just throw temps at it. And by the way, guys, if you would be in this situation and your entitled awful boss cancelled your vacation essentially, what would you do? Would you stay loyal to this awful boss and ridiculous company? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, and please don't forget to like the video because that really helps me tremendously. It took weeks to ramp people up to handle even simple cases without breaking things. We had some documentation, but at this point most of the real knowledge was in people's heads. If we walked away, the company would be in serious trouble. Not immediately dead or something, but definitely executives having very bad weeks. So when boss said, if you don't like it, quit, she thought she was calling our bluff, but she didn't realize that we were not bluffing. After that call, our internal group chats blew up. The private one, not the official team's channel, the one with almost everyone in implementation, plus a couple of folks from support who had left our department before and wanted to watch the drama. People were furious. The coworker with the overseas wedding was in full panic mode. Another one had non-refundable flights. My partner was texting me things like, absolutely not, you're not skipping vacation again for these people. Some people wanted to go nuclear on HR right away, others wanted to wait and see if our manager could talk the boss down, but a few minutes later my manager DM'd me and asked if he could call. He sounded tired. Like, soul-crushingly tired. He confirmed that boss had gone around him. He had been in a separate management call where she basically announced that what she was gonna do and framed it as aligning incentives and maximizing utilization and shut down any pushback. He said, I argued, I really did. HR was not on the call though. She said she would loop them in. I asked him straight up, okay, so if I still take my approved PTO? There was a pause and he said quietly, officially it might be marked as unapproved. And unofficially, I'm not gonna tell you to break any policies, but you should do what's right for you and document everything. That was the moment my brain switched from angry to calculating. Boss had given us an order, no vacations, and if we don't like it, quit. The malicious compliance path was obvious, but we needed to do it in a way that was undeniable and technically within her own rules. Step 1. Clarify the directive in writing. If you've ever worked somewhere dysfunctional, you know the first rule is get it in writing. People will swear they never said the thing you heard them say, unless there's an email or a chat log, so I sent the boss a politely worded email, CCing my manager and HR's general inbox. Something like, hi boss, following up on today's department meeting. I want to make sure I understand the new PTO policy correctly, so I can plan accordingly. Number 1, is the PTO freeze intended to apply to all previously approved PTO as well as new requests? Number 2, how long is the freeze expected to last? Number 3, for those of us with already booked non-refundable travel, what's the process for requesting an exception? Also, during the meeting, you mentioned that anyone who feels this is unreasonable should consider if this is the right place and quit if we don't like it. I assume that was more of a general statement about culture fit, but I want to be sure there's no misunderstanding. Are you indicating that employees who cannot move existing plans should resign rather than take their previously approved PTO? Thanks for clarifying. Nice and neutral. No accusations, just please confirm you said the thing you said on the record. A few others did something similar, each from their own angle, some mentioning the handbook, some mentioning legal requirements without saying legal. Boss replied pretty quickly actually, which tells me she didn't run this through HR first, and she confirmed that the freeze applied to all PTO that impacts client timelines, and it would last until after the current strategic push, which was this very vague time window. Exceptions would be rare and strongly discouraged, and people should not expect approval. About the quit remark, she wrote something like, as stated, if someone feels that a high-performance environment with temporary sacrifices is not right for them, they may choose to seek opportunities elsewhere. That is their decision. So she didn't literally write, I order you to quit, but combined with her directive and the meeting recording, yes, some people had auto recordings on because of note-taking, it was enough to show her attitude. HR, by the way, didn't reply, not yet. Step 2 though, check the legal angle. One of my coworkers had a cousin who has a labor lawyer, and she did a quick informal consult. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but the summary was, the company could manage PTO scheduling, but blanket indefinite freezes for an entire department would be sketchy, especially without proper notice and process. Revoking previously approved PTO, especially where people had already spent money, would be a strong argument for constructive dismissal if someone resigned over it. If they actually tried to discipline or fire someone for taking already approved leave, they would likely be in trouble if it went to the labor board. The cousin's advice was, document everything, and if they block PTO, ask for the denial in writing. If they say quit, keep that too. And we did exactly that. Step number 3, coordinated job hunting. That same day, our group chat basically turned into a job fair. People shared recruiter contacts, someone made a spreadsheet where we listed where we had applied, what stage we were in, salary ranges, and so on. A couple of ex-coworkers from other companies saw the drama, word travels fast, and messaged us saying, hey, we are hiring. And well, I was not the first to get an interview, but I was among the more senior people, and my experience was niche enough that recruiters loved me. Within a week, I had 3 serious leads. Everyone was still doing their jobs during the day, but there was a noticeable drop in extra effort. No more voluntary evening calls, no more, sure, I will jump on that last-minute crisis at 6 p.m. People did exactly what was in their tickets and nothing more, and the boss started noticing. She sent out one of those, we need more energy, emails full of fake motivation. Nobody responded beyond the required, received, thanks. Step 4, forcing the PTO denial. My vacation was 3 weeks away, it had been approved months ago, flights and rental were paid for, my partner was already counting days. With the lawyer cousin's comments in mind and knowing I might not even be there by then, I decided to push the issue. I wrote another email to boss and my manager CCing HR again, spelling out the details, dates of my previously approved PTO, screenshots of the approval in our HR system, receipts for non-refundable expenses, a clear statement that I was still planning to take that time unless explicitly told otherwise. And then the key line. If the company is revoking this previously approved PTO and directing me not to take this leave, please confirm that in writing so I can evaluate my options. And the boss took the bait. She replied with something like, "As discussed, your PTO falls within the freeze period and cannot be accommodated without impacting critical client deliverables. You're expected to be available for work on those dates. You may submit a new PTO request for a later time after the current push." And there it was, written, timestamped and clear. She tried to soften it with some nonsense about appreciating my flexibility, but the core was there. You are expected to work, your previously approved leave is cancelled. A few others did the same and got almost identical replies. HR finally answered one of them with this weaselly line about working with your manager to balance business needs and personal plans. But they didn't override boss or give us any concrete help. The classic, we are here to protect the company mode. Fine with me. If the company was not gonna protect us, we would just protect ourselves. Step 5, the compliance. My boss had said, if you don't like it, quit. And she also made it clear that our vacations were not happening unless we moved them to some vague later. She had put her directive in writing, so we complied with it. We quit. In our country, we had a standard notice period. The law said if you resign, you are supposed to give that notice and the employer is supposed to either have you work it or pay you out. We had mapped out our projects and timelines. The big push was supposed to peak right around when my vacation was. With several big clients going live in a tight window, boss's plan relied on us being fully available for that period, so we coordinated our resignations to land so that our last official working days would be either right before those launches or in the middle of them. We were not sabotaging anything, we were just following the rules. Out of a department of maybe 18 implementation analysts and specialists, 9 of us decided we were done. That included me and the other senior analyst, 3 mid-level analysts who handled most of the tricky integration stuff, 2 people who specialized in a specific legacy system that half our big merchants used, and 1 person who knew the internal reporting tool inside and out. Also 1 person from the small special project subgroup that boss loved using as her pet team. We staggered our resignation emails over 2 days so it didn't look like an obvious mass walkout organized in a single meeting, even though it kinda was. Each email was polite and the standard template like, "Dear manager, please accept this email as formal notice of my resignation from the company with my last working day being XYZ in accordance with my contractual notice period. Thank you for the opportunities during my time here. Best regards." No drama, no accusations. Just a quiet, "I complied with your suggestion." Our manager called me almost immediately. He sounded genuinely upset and I felt bad for him because he was not the problem. I told him that between the PTO situation and the mounting workload, I couldn't see a future there. I also mentioned very calmly that revoking approved PTO after we had spent money and then telling us to quit if we didn't like it was not something I was just willing to accept. And well, he didn't argue. He just said he understood and that he was also considering his options. That alone told me a lot. Boss, on the other hand, did not take it well. She did not reach out after the first 1 or 2 resignations, but when the 5th one hit, she called an emergency team meeting. We joined the call and she launched straight into it, asking what was going on and whether someone was poisoning the well. She tried to frame it like everything was just a misunderstanding about PTO and that she wished people had come for her earlier instead of overreacting. 1 person finally said very calmly, "We did come to you. You told us to quit if we didn't like it, so we are quitting." You could see the vein in boss's forehead. She tried to walk it back, saying that, of course, she hadn't meant that we should literally all quit, it was just about fit. But at that point, half the people on the call had already signed offers elsewhere. We didn't need her backpedaling. She ended the call with something like, "Well, I'm disappointed, but we'll move forward with the team we have. We will treat this as an opportunity to bring in fresh talent." Well, spoiler alert, there was no fresh talent ready to walk in. The cracks started showing pretty fast. Recruiting was scrambling to post jobs and get interviews going. But you cannot magically summon senior experience out of thin air. They were looking at 6 to 8 weeks minimum to even get new people hired, and then at least a month or 2 before they were not a liability on client calls. Our major clients started noticing this too. Launch calls would have 3 or 4 TBD assignments where a named person should have been. The merchant would ask, "Who's our main contact after OP leaves?" And the answer would be vague. One big client escalated to our account management director because they had just found out their assigned implementation lead was leaving. Account management had not been told because boss thought she could manage the messaging by delaying official announcement until the last second. Now she had not only a staffing crisis but also a trust crisis with some of our highest value accounts. My manager later told me, after he left too, that there were several fun meetings where executives asked boss variations of, "Why are half the senior people leaving at once? Why did they all leave without any performance issues on record? What changed recently in your leadership approach?" Boss's answer was apparently not some mix of market conditions, people not wanting to work hard, and a culture shift some legacy employees couldn't handle. It was not super convincing. Meanwhile, my vacation approached. I'd already accepted an offer at another company that, funnily enough, had a clear written policy about PTO that said they'd never revoke already approved leave except for extreme emergencies, and even then, they would compensate you. My last day at the old company was a couple days before my vacation dates. The exit interview with HR was interesting. They did the usual "why are you leaving" question. I could have just said better opportunity, but at that point I had nothing to lose and everything documented, so I said calmly that the main drivers were systemic overwork with no realistic resourcing, revocation of previously approved PTO after people had financially committed to it, and the department head explicitly telling people to quit if they didn't like it, and HR not intervening when policies were clearly being ignored. The HR person did that neutral "thank you for your candor" thing, but I could tell this wasn't the first time they had heard something like it since boss arrived. They asked if I'd be willing to put some of it in writing for an internal review. I said sure and forwarded them the email chain, including boss's written PTO revocation. I also mentioned the recorded all hands where she had dropped the "quit" line in case they wanted to track that down. Then I logged out of my laptop for the last time, turned in my badge, and went home. 2 days later, I was on a beach, actually offline for the first time in a while. No Slack, no email, no just 5 minutes calls. We had complied. She said if we didn't like it, we should quit, so we did. The standstill part came in waves. Within the first week after my last day, I started getting texts from ex-coworkers who were still there for now. Apparently, 2 big merchant launches had to be postponed because there was literally nobody who understood their custom integration paths in enough detail to handle it without massive risk. One launch went ahead anyway because sales pressure was insane and it erupted into a train wreck, failed payments, angry customers, and emergency rollbacks. Boss tried to step in on a high-level technical call and got absolutely shredded by the client CTO because she couldn't answer basic questions and just kept hand-waving. The support team, which already hated when implementation dumped half-configured accounts on them, was now getting a flood of "why doesn't this work?" tickets with zero context. They started escalating right back up and insisting they were not gonna carry the can for things they hadn't been part of. Account managers were getting daily calls from merchants saying things like, "Every time we talk to someone new, they say they are filling in for someone who left. Who exactly is running this project?" Internally, there was lots of finger pointing. Boss blamed recruiting for being slow, HR for tying her hands, and of course the people who resigned for being unprofessional. Others pointed out that none of this had been a problem before she decided PTO was optional and good people were replaceable, and then my manager quit. He stayed a little longer than we did, trying to keep the wheels from falling off completely, but eventually he decided he didn't want to be the one holding the bag. He got an offer somewhere that actually respected work-life balance, and when he resigned there was nobody between boss and the shell of a team she had hollowed out. That is when things really stalled. From what I heard, project timelines became pure fiction, internal escalations became constant, the metrics that boss had bragged about in her "we're a family but also warriors" speeches cratered, executives hate nothing more than public embarrassment and missed revenue projections. Boss had promised them the moon and now she was delivering a crater. I didn't think much more about it after that. I started my new job, enjoyed my vacation, eased into a place where taking PTO was not treated like a crime, and then a couple months later I got a very interesting message on LinkedIn. It was from our old company's VP of operations. I'd met him a few times, but we had never really interacted directly. He was higher up and more on the business side. He asked if I would be open to a quick chat, and I was curious, so I said sure. We hopped on a call, and after some small talk he got to the point. Apparently, after the wave of resignations and the resulting chaos, the executive team had done a deep dive into what had gone wrong in our department. They had listened to complaints, read exit interviews, checked the timeline against departmental changes, and boss did not come out looking good. She had unilaterally imposed a PTO freeze without proper HR sign-off, she had revoked approved PTO in violation of policy, and she had ignored multiple warnings from my manager and others about burnout. She had set unrealistic targets and then lied or optimistically interpreted status updates to make everything look on track when it actually wasn't. She had made that "if you don't like it, quit" remark more than once, including in at least one meeting that had been recorded. There had also been a couple of complaints about her making motivational comments that skirted dangerously close to harassment when people actually pushed back. Nothing criminal, but definitely not aligned with company values. Long story short, they fired her, not laid her off, fired. From what I gathered, it was without cause on paper, because that's how these things usually go at that level, but internally everyone knew why. Then the VP said something that made me do a double take. "We underestimated how critical your team was and how badly this was handled. We are trying to rebuild. Would you have any interest in coming back under different leadership and with a revised structure?" I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. And by the way, guys, if you would be offered this option, would you come back to this company? Let me know in the comments. I certainly wouldn't, let me tell you. He explained that they had hired a new department head from a different company, someone with an actual background in implementation and a reputation for not being an idiot with people, aka not a Karen, and they were splitting the department into more manageable pots so no single person was overloaded. They were putting clear guardrails around PTO, codifying that approved vacations would not be revoked except for literal disasters. They were reviewing compensation for critical roles after realizing they'd been underpaying compared to the market. In other words, they'd been smacked in the face by reality and were trying to fix it. I told him I was happy where I was, but I appreciated the offer, but then he said the magic words, "We are prepared to offer a meaningful pay adjustment, plus a signing bonus to recognize the value of your experience if you return." And I won't pretend that money doesn't matter. Between that and the fact that a lot of my old coworkers were being approached with similar offers, I was at least tempted. So I did something I hadn't done in a while. I called a few of the old team members, and it turns out I was not the only one who had gotten that call. The company had reached out to several of us. It was almost comical. Boss had thrown away her experienced staff like they were interchangeable, and now the company was basically crawling back on hands and knees. And well, some people were interested, some people were not, period. They had moved on emotionally and professionally. Others, like me, were cautiously open to the idea but didn't want to walk back into a mess. So that's exactly why I did not come back to the company after they treated me this poorly. If you mess with your best employees and don't respect them, don't be surprised when they don't return. Edit, some people in the comments were asking me to talk more about the consequences to the company as a result of our actions, and well, here we go. About 6 months later, I got a call from Sam, one of my old coworkers who had decided to stay through the chaos. He wanted to catch up over drinks, and I was curious to hear how things had turned out. The picture he painted was worse than I'd imagined. After half the department quit, the company hemorrhaged money trying to fix the damage. They brought in expensive contractors who didn't know the systems, burned through their emergency reserves, and still couldn't stop the bleeding. Several major clients had walked away, taking millions in annual revenue with them. The big strategic push that Boss had been so excited about, it was a complete failure. They hit maybe 20% of their targets. Sam told me they went through 2 rounds of restructuring, laid off a bunch of people in other departments to cut costs, and at one point were genuinely close to shutting down the whole operation. The holding company had apparently considered just pulling the plug entirely. They survived but barely, and they never really recovered. The department that used to handle 80% of enterprise onboarding was now a skeleton crew, and the company had quietly pivoted to smaller, less complex clients. All because one manager thought experienced employees were replaceable and vacation was optional. And the next one is another malicious compliance story that is titled "The Art of Looking Busy." So a few years ago, I was employed at a production company where I typically finished all of my responsibilities for the 8 to 5 workday in advance quite often before noon. After a few months, one day my supervisor called me aside and said, "You need to appear to be busier. I'm starting to get some feedback that you complete your work too early." I inquired if I should assist any of my coworkers or otherwise take on extra work, but no. Just click your mouse, shuffle some papers and look serious. This was my moment for some ill-mannered compliance for the next 2 weeks. I went full office space. I walked erratically around the office holding a clipboard and looked stressed. clicked in and out of random spreadsheets while squinting my eyes as if I were conducting important work, scheduled fake meetings like Q4 strategy alignment, printed out swaths of blank pages just to look dramatic when walking from my desk to the printer. I brought in a second monitor featuring graphs that retained no identifiable content. A few days in, upper management began praising my work ethic, believe it or not. I even received a promotion over another coworker who worked substantially harder than myself. Fast forward 3 months, I took a position at the very same company I still work for today. I can only imagine that my old coworkers mistakenly believed I was a wizard of some type at a corporate level even. And the next one is another malicious compliance story, and it is titled "Always be specific when babysitting." Also, if you're still watching, let me know where you are watching from today and whether you enjoy the malicious compliance stories. So this happened years ago when I was babysitting a friend's kid who's elementary school aged. We had spent most of the day inside. He watched Power Rangers for a while before playing his PlayStation. He liked to drive around in GTA. After about an hour, I told him he should go play outside since it was such a nice day, and then I went to the kitchen to grab us a bottle of water to stay hydrated. When I came out the kitchen, he was standing on the porch outside, looking through the screen door while still playing GTA. I told him it's not what I meant, but that he wasn't wrong and did listen, so he could keep playing. I made sure to be much more specific after that. I think I still have a picture of him I sent to his dad for proof. And the next one is a fantastic petty revenge story that is titled "Something is Fishy." So I worked at a small company that had a Chrysler Voyager van which we used for short errands around town. Sometimes a few of us might use it to go out to lunch, really no big deal. But then one day, our manager relocated nearby in temporary housing and demanded to have full exclusive use of the van. I lived more than an hour away, and I normally took the commuter train. I had to do a pickup of expensive gear from a specialized rental facility near where I live in order to run diagnostic tests on some equipment at work. I took the van home that day and picked up the gear the following morning. I drove down to the office and we proceeded to do our work. Well, then here comes our manager. He comes up to me and scowls. "So you left me high and dry." I told him that I needed the van to pick up important test gear, and he said, "Well, I had to take a cab," he retorted. Seeing that our van was gonna be taken away, we resolved to leave a parting gift. Before turning over the van, we drove to the nursery and bought a canister of fish fertilizer oil. Generous samples were deposited inside the door panels and under the seat. It was summer and the temperature was sweltering. We promptly relinquished the van to the manager without any fanfare. Over the ensuing days, I overheard him commenting about a persisting bad odor that wouldn't go away. We got in my coworker's Mercedes and drove off for lunch, trying not to laugh. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.